Really glad you're with us for the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. I think we had a fairly lighthearted episode planned for you, but now we know more details from that shooting near the ICE facility in Dallas, Texas. We'll get into all the details on that in just a moment. But Jim, it's been exactly 2 weeks since the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We talked earlier this week about those two other incidents in Sacramento and New Hampshire. And now this, and it appears that anyone who thought that any of these might be isolated incidents or not a significant problem, it's a significant problem.
Greg, I was really hoping we could get through a week without discussing some terrible act of violence. You know, reset the counter. It has been 0 weeks since we've had to not had to talk about one of them. But alas, that is what's front and center in the news today.
Exactly. We'll get into all the details of that. We'll also talk about the showdown over spending in Congress and between Congress and the White House just about a week before the end of the fiscal year. And we'll also be talking about Google's admission that they pretty much did the Biden administration's bidding in censoring content that the Biden administration did not appreciate. So a lot to get to today, as always. But first, and given the headline that we just talked about, it's certainly possible that you're going to need some help dealing with news stories constantly talking about this. And this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. And whether it's relationships, whether it's trouble at work, whatever the issues are that are weighing on your mind and weighing on your heart, maybe those conversations with friends help some, but maybe it's not quite enough. And BetterHelp is here to help you. BetterHelp has been helping people find their match for more than 10 years, and they have a 4.9 rating out of 1.7 million client session reviews.
With more than 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served more than 5 million people all around the world. And it's convenient. You can join a session with a therapist at the click of a button, which helps you fit therapy into your busy life. It's all fully online, which means you can pause your subscription whenever you need to and switch therapists anytime at no extra cost.
As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. That means they can find someone that'll help you. Find the one with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/3ml. That's better, HELP.com/3ml. All right, Jim, as mentioned, I think you and I both woke up to the news or shortly after waking up hearing about this news this morning that there had been a shooting at the ICE facility in Dallas, and that it was in the area of the facility where transfers are made, bringing detainees in, transferring them out, whatever the situation may be. And it appears that there was a shooter, an attempted sniper from an elevated position. From what we're hearing at this point, it appears only detainees were hit, and it appears at least one of them is dead. The shooter is believed to have died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. There was a press conference just a little while ago, just before we started recording. Here is FBI Special Agent in Charge Joe Rothrock from the Dallas FBI.
I can confirm at this time that the FBI is investigating this incident as an act of targeted violence. It is unfortunately just the most recent example we've seen of targeted violence, to include here in North Texas, where back on July 4th, we saw a coordinated attack carried out against an immigration detention center in Alvarado, Texas. What I can also share with you is that early evidence that we've seen from rounds that were found near the suspected shooter contain messages that are anti-ICE in nature. Again, this is just the most recent example of this type of attack. This will be a whole of government response. There will be no resource not utilized to bring all those individuals who are responsible to bring them to justice and to hold them accountable. While we're not releasing identities of any victims at this time, what I can confirm for you is no members of law enforcement were hurt during this attack.
So that's the latest from Dallas. There'll be other updates throughout the day, and I think that gives us enough to go on to analyze here a little bit, Jim, because once we started to hear that the shooter was down and the only people hit were migrants, it's one of two things. Either it's somebody who wanted to target the migrants or somebody targeting ICE and was a bad shot. And so it turns out to be the latter, especially with the information about the casings. We don't know exactly what was written on them, but it's very similar to other instances, including the shooter in Utah 2 weeks ago. So what do you make of the latest?
Well, listeners probably ought to know that you and I debated whether this should be one of our featured martinis for the day. There was not a lot of clear evidence or information coming out until right before we started taping, and then the declaration from the FBI that the shell casing messages etched in there were anti-ICE, which certainly seems to point in a clear direction. Sometimes in the news commentary business, they call it a 24-hour rule that, whenever there's a mass shooting, whenever there's some act of violence, a lot of misinformation floats around. You often hear during a shooting reports of a second shooter. Sometimes that comes from echoes and things like that. So I understand the hesitation. On the other hand, people want to know what happened, and people want to know, who did this? Why did they do this? What was going on here? And I almost wonder, Greg, in light of the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk shooting, in which there was a manhunt for the perpetrator. In the interim, when the perpetrator, was captured, this widespread belief usually in hard left progressive circles, people who wanted to believe, oh, it was a MAGA guy. It was, it wasn't Jamel Hill or somebody was saying this was, a white supremacist on white supremacist violence. It was something like this different set of facts got in there, and you saw all kinds of fairly prominent liberals, the Lawrence tribes of the world, coming out and acting as if it had been proven fact that the shooter had been MAGA, angry at Charlie Kirk for not being right-wing enough. I almost wonder, look, law enforcement is, it's got to put out the information when it's appropriate. But I almost wonder if putting this out there is a effort to dissuade anyone from an erroneous conclusion here. This certainly, when you put in anti-ICE onto your shell casings, that does not indicate that you are there because you really hate illegal immigrants and you don't want ICE to do their jobs. That indicates you do want ICE to do their jobs, or you don't want ICE to do their jobs and you hate them for doing so. Again, words do not spontaneously make some nut job decide to run out and start shooting people. But if you constantly describe ICE agents as fascists, if you start, jackbooted thugs and all that stuff, is there always a chance that some nut out there is going to take you seriously and say, oh, well, these are Nazis. Well, I might as well go shoot them. I might as well fight them. This is time for us to do that. Again, we have to respect the First Amendment, but you do start to wonder if this constant demonization of Immigration and Customs Enforcement officials turns into something where somebody out there is like, well, if I shoot them, I will be greeted as a hero. Again, does this mean ICE is above criticism? Heck no. Does this mean that we can't have impassioned debates about immigration policy? Not at all. But, people have been saying, oh, why are ICE agents wearing masks? Well, because there are a bunch of nut jobs out there who want to kill them. That's why. And if they know their faces, then they find out their names and identities. They can find the home addresses. I really wish it were not so, but that, the wearing of the mask starts to feel logical, starts to feel like an inevitable preventative measure. And Greg, I believe California just banned law enforcement officials from wearing masks. We're a long way from COVID, aren't we?
Yeah, we sure are. I'm not sure that can apply to federal authorities. Yeah. I know there's a debate about that. Gavin Newsom certainly thinks it can. But yes, we're going to learn a whole lot more, and we don't want to jump to any more conclusions than what we just heard in that press conference. Senator Ted Cruz did take a couple of questions after the law enforcement officials left and basically said what you said. When you start doxing people, you're basically painting a target on them because somebody's going to take that the wrong way, and doxing's horrible in and of itself. So don't do that. Don't do that. Well, we'll try to figure out more as time goes on. But again, no additional speculation when speculation's not going to help anybody. But let's talk about Caldera and the skincare products that are high quality and made for men. A lot of other products, when they are made for men, overly complicated, packed with strange ingredients that you might not have a lot of reason to trust, or they're just not that great. But Caldera, their high-performance skincare is made just for men. It's simple, effective, it's backed by science, and I'll tell you, I love the cleanser. It keeps my face feeling clean and fresh, and it smells good too. And the other products also smell good, also very high quality.
Greg, because of the subject matter of today's news, we're less jovial than we usually are, a lot fewer jokes, and a couple of folks who don't know the vocabulary might say, hey, Jim and Greg are really non-comedogenic today. But that is not what comedogenic means. Non-comedogenic means the products will not clog your pores. And Caldera Lab products not only will not clog your pores, they're cruelty-free, which means there's no animal testing ever. They're plastic neutral. One product sold means 1 unit of plastic 1 unit of plastic gets removed from the environment. And remember, these products are tested and trusted. Every formula takes years to develop, so nothing gets sold unless they're certain that it works.
Skincare just doesn't have to be as complicated as it is, but it should be good, so upgrade your routine with Caldera Lab and see the difference for yourself. Go to calderalab.com/3ml and use 3ml at checkout for 20% off your first order. Well, Jim, on to our second bad martini today, and the Alphabet is apologizing. Oh, I'm sorry. Alphabet is the parent company of Google, and they are apologizing essentially for doing the Biden administration's bidding when it comes to censoring content the Biden administration did not like. And so this all comes in a letter to the House Oversight Committee from Alphabet, the parent company of Google, admitting they shut down content, particularly on YouTube, that didn't violate their terms and conditions, but they did so under pressure from senior Biden administration officials, including some at the White House itself. Here is the story. First of all, Google vowed on Tuesday to offer YouTube accounts that were permanently banned for political speech, giving them the ability to be reinstated, and the big tech giant admitted that it once faced pressure from the Biden administration to remove content about COVID-19. They also, in addition to saying that senior Biden administration officials, including folks at the White House, conducted repeated and sustained outreach to Alphabet and pressed the company regarding certain user-generated content related to the pandemic that did not violate its policies. It also says the administration created a political atmosphere that sought to influence the actions of platforms based on their concerns regarding misinformation. And so Jim says the folks at Alphabet grappled with these decisions, but ultimately seemed to give in most cases, even again when the terms of use weren't violated. So this feels like a story of, yeah, we knew that. The admission is good, but it's especially rich timing considering how all the left in the wake of the whole Jimmy Kimmel fiasco is on their high horse about free speech and free expression, when for 4 years it was very, very different in a very different direction.
Well, Greg, I'm going to get into some points about online posting in a second, but I think you had it right the first time. The Alphabet should apologize. The letter O and 0 are far too similar, and a lot of times I've had to type in my password, and I can't tell whether it's supposed to be a 0 or a letter O. You know, the number 1, lowercase l, capital I, way too similar. What do you spread out? It's like kids on a soccer field. They're all smushed together. You can't tell one from the other. And finally, the number 6 and the letter G. Again, all it is how much does that little line get extended and does it connect? So Alphabet, get your act together. I would go after the silent letters, but when your last name is Garrity and has a silent GH, I guess I'd be throwing stones from a glass house. So, and we did get some jokes in today's episode. So yes, this is not exactly shocking. All kinds of tech companies talked about this during the pandemic. And I'm sure everybody in the Biden administration was convinced they were doing the right thing. We don't want that misinformation getting out there. Therefore, we're going to call up Google and say, or Alphabet or any of these. You got to take those YouTubes down. You just can't have people saying that kind of stuff right now. Their lives are at stake. And if you allow that YouTube host to stay on there, people will die, to quote the illustrious Remy doing his videos for the Reason Foundation over there. So, frustrating. I would like to see more from this letter about, like, dear Alphabet, what did you learn from this? What lesson? Because here's the thing. It's great that they're doing this. I'm sure everybody who's going to get their YouTube channel back is going to love it. But what happens when there's a Democratic president again? What happens when there's a Democratic administration again? And they feel that some piece of information is so bad and is so consequential that the government is going to say, look, we're not going to pass a law saying you can't say these sorts of things because that would violate the First Amendment. We're just going to have this workaround. We're going to call you up and say, hey, Alphabet, we'd really like you to take these things down. And, we're not telling you, wink, wink. We're not, I'm just saying it's a nice company you got there. And, it'd be really terrible if something happened to it. So you really should take this stuff down. I also kind of feel like it's a little bit of Alphabet. Like why didn't you stand up then? Why didn't you go public with the Biden administration pressuring you to do this? Why didn't you, why was this all done behind the scenes and in secret? It's great to see this now, but it feels, again, it's 2025. And they're, oh, hi, hey, in 2020, 2021, we were really bad. Sorry about that. Thanks for that quick response to this, guys. And again, is there any guarantee we have that this is not going to happen again the next time there's an imminent? And again, Brandon Carr should not be running around on, podcasts and saying we can do this the easy way or the hard way. He should not, he says, it may be up to us at the FCC to adjudicate Jimmy Kimmel's monologue. No, that is not your job. That is not what we have the FCC for. You're supposed to regulate the bandwidth. Who's broadcasting at what frequency? That's, where it's supposed to extend there. And I think that the outcome we saw with Kimmel, where he basically got stuck in the timeout chair for a couple of days, that's probably what would have happened anyway if Carr had never opened his mouth. And I kind of wish he had not done this. But if you're going to get really mad about Carr, can we get mad about the Biden administration officials calling up social media companies and saying, because there's nothing in the law that says they've got content regulation powers over the media. So, deeply frustrating. It's a good news if you're getting your YouTube channel back. Congratulations. But can't feel enormously reassured about how long these relatively more pro-free speech policies will remain in place, and whether these companies will knuckle under the next time an administration says, yeah, we don't like that. You should take down that YouTube channel.
Exactly. Yeah, we know about DHS and the FBI pressuring Twitter back under the previous regime before Elon Musk. And then you've got, Zuckerberg has basically said the same thing. You've got Google doing this now. Jim, Google and Facebook are about as big as you can possibly get. So if you can't stand up for the right thing here, who else is going to do it? It's a pretty shameful episode. I'm glad they're finally admitting what happened here, but it's way too late. And the fact that they maybe didn't check in with each other. Hey, is this happening to you too? It would have been much easier to band together and push back. But something tells me in the political environment at the time, they didn't really want to as much as they claim right now.
Yeah, wouldn't we all love to be a powerful Silicon Valley media mogul with your own social media platform that you own so that you can take orders from Joe Biden? Or more accurately, who was it, Fauci or what other Biden administration officials were doing, because, Biden was eating oatmeal that day.
That's right. Exactly. So, again, let's hope that they have learned their lesson. But given the right setup of leaders and circumstances and the inclination of most of these tech leaders, I don't know that it's the last time we've seen it. I think your instincts are spot on there. I'll tell you who's not going to censor your content and your speech, though. That's Quo. That's right. One of the tools we've personally seen make a huge difference for business owners is Quo, formerly OpenPhone. We've talked about them a lot. It's the same great business phone system you've heard us talk about before, just with a new name. And think about it. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. So maybe the last time you had a plumbing emergency, which I just had a broken washer. So if the first plumber didn't answer, did you wait or call the next one on the list? No, you just moved on. You went to the first one who could actually come out and help you. Well, that's going to miss out on business, going to miss out on clients and potentially long-term relationships. But with Quo, you'll never miss an opportunity to connect with existing and potential customers.
With Quo, formerly OpenPhone, your team can share one number and collaborate on customer calls and texts like a shared inbox, so anyone can jump in and keep response times fast. And you don't have to worry about voicemail anymore. Quo features a built-in AI agent to be set up in minutes, so you can handle calls after hours, answer questions, and capture leads, so you will never miss a customer. So whether you're a solo operator who's drowning in calls and texts, or you have a large team that needs better collaboration tools, Quo is a no-brainer.
You can get started for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/3ml. That's QUO.com/3ml. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over at no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, Jim, on to our final martini. Also bad to a certain extent, but also crazy to a certain extent. Today is September 24th, which means we have 6 days left in the fiscal year. And at the end of the fiscal year, if there's not funding, there is going to be a government shutdown. Now, the House of Representatives passed a spending bill last week, and it was basically a continuing resolution with some additional money for security issues. Democrats are very upset that some Obamacare subsidies are going to be reduced or eliminated. What they don't tell you, though, is that those were already sunset to end at that point when Joe Biden was president. So there was a Democratic plan for those to end at the end of this fiscal year. But now Democrats, of course, are blaming Donald Trump. So after that bill passed the House, they immediately sent it to the Senate. It didn't get the 60 votes as expected. Then the Democrats had an alternative bill. That didn't get anywhere close to 60 votes either. So now we're at this impasse. Trump isn't going to meet with Democratic leaders. Even the differing party leaders in the Senate aren't talking much. Yeah, obviously, the Republicans hold the vast majority of the leverage, except the Democrats' ability to stop them from getting to 60 votes. So, Jim, we've seen this in so many ways before. Of course, earlier this year, Chuck Schumer decided not to shut down the government, supported cloture, had a few Democrats join him, and he's been a pariah in the party ever since. So now he's absolutely determined not to go along with the Republican bill. So what happens next?
Probably nothing good. And the entire, since the talk of a government shutdown began over the last couple of weeks, there's this really important question. What do Democrats want? Right? If they're going to filibuster a spending bill and not allow the government to stay open, what do they want in exchange? What's their ransom demand? And if you ask all 47 Democrats in the Senate, you may well get 47 different answers. If you ask the grassroots, they'll basically, the problem is not that they like this policy here, ICE enforcement, or that policy there. The problem they really have is that Donald Trump is president. If you ask people, what is Trump doing wrong? They're probably going to answer everything, right? Yeah. Well, you're not going to be able to say, in order to keep the government open, we demand that Donald Trump stop everything, right? You might be able to get a little bit more funding here for some priority. You might be able to get, might be able to tweak around the edges. But of course, that's not really tweaking around the edges. That's, what Democrats want is wholesale sweeping changes. And you can't do that with 47 votes in the Senate. Yes, I get that Chuck Schumer is being treated like he's got Ebola. And I get that, Democratic Senate challengers don't want him to come out and support them. And they're emphasizing that they're not the candidates who are supported by the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee and things like that. But in the end, so I understand Schumer's feeling, I got to do something. He may well be calculating it's better to have this fight and lose than to look like he's not willing to have this fight.
Yeah.
But that said, you still are going to go into a government shutdown fight. When people who get hit the hardest by a government shutdown are federal workers. My guess is that we haven't passed any appropriations bills, right, Greg?
I think a few got done in the House. There's no regular order for several in the House and nothing, I think, in the Senate.
Well, they also got to be signed into law, right? So it's got to be a thing where it's already set and done. So wouldn't this mean Russell Voigt will decide who's essential and who's not, and what parts of the over at Office of Management and Budget? So conceivably, he'll decide, because it used to be in a Democratic administration, they would put the little barriers around the Washington Monument, the World War II monument, where you don't even go into it. You just walk. Well, it's shut down, everybody. And that was, all of these things were done in order to generate the negative press. Mrs. Ochmanik's 6th grade class really wanted to visit the Smithsonian, but they can't because of the government shutdown. In America, whose fault it is. The Republicans. Look at these crying school kids. Aren't they just the way of that kind of coverage? And I don't know if they're going to get that, in part because Republicans will have the votes who have said, look, here's our funding bill, keeping the government open. We'd like to pass it. The Democrats in the Senate won't let us because they're filibustering it. So that's hurdle number one. And Schumer might be saying, okay, the media will cover for us on this. Conceivably. That seems like a safe enough bet. But, government workers either stay home and don't get paid. Now, they get back pay once the government shutdown ends. Or they have to go into work and not get paid. And they're not particularly big fans of that. Yes, maybe it's a little flattering to be told you're essential to the operations of the government. But, so here's the thing. And whenever people ask me, is there going to be a government shutdown? If you have a government shutdown that lasts 24 hours, usually the funding runs out on a Friday. So you've got 48 hours of negotiating before anybody even notices. Most people don't notice that the federal government is closed on a weekend because most federal office buildings are closed on a weekends, the courthouses, all that kind of stuff. So, 72 hours is when it starts to become a real problem. The longer it goes, the more Americans notice the effects. Greg, how intent is Donald Trump on making life easier for federal workers?
Not a high priority,
right? So, now if you're a federal worker, who do you expect to protect you? Democrats, right? They are the party of government. So my suspicion is that these Senate Democrats are going to feel a lot more pressure. Again, first couple of days, nobody's going to feel all that bad. a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. At that point, federal workers are going to be like, hey, wait, I was supposed to get paid, right? I got bills to pay. I wasn't counting on this. Why are you guys holding out for this? So I think a lot more pressure is going to be on the Democratic side once a government shutdown starts. So I think the stage is set for Democrats to lose. So, if you're Trump, you're like, let's go, baby. Let's have this fight. I feel pretty good about my odds. And remember, the longest government shutdown in history happened in late 2018, early 2019, as the transition to a new Congress was happening. So Trump will don't play chicken with Trump, right? I know there's the whole probably Chuck Schumer's like, I'm going to do the taco trade. Trump always chickens out. I'm going to do just fine. I don't think so. I think there's a good chance Trump holds out on this, and I also think that the fundamentals of the Democrats being the ones holding up the funding bill, the media can only cover for that so long. I think eventually people the other thing is that when government shuts down, everybody's like, oh, I'm going to win this fight. Very often the dominant vibe amongst public polling is a pox on both their houses. Very rarely does somebody come out of a government shutdown fight looking good. So I think it's just going to be a mess. I think it's going to hurt everybody, but I think the Democrats have more to lose. And, I prefer not to have a government shutdown. If they're going to have one, fine, let's do one 72 hours. But let's not hold out for something where we all kind of know sooner or later Democrats are going to have to go, say, okay, we'll pass the funding bill, people get back to work, and life goes on for everyone.
Yeah, to borrow a Trump line from earlier this year from a more unpleasant moment, you don't have any cards, Chuck Schumer. I mean, the White House, the Senate, you do have the ability to block them to get to 60, but Republicans have had a bill that's passed the House. It's sitting there. And oh, by the way, it's still kicking the can down the road from Biden-era levels, which were extended earlier this year, and the one that where Schumer backed down. And they're still doing it again. We haven't even gotten to the spending levels that Trump actually wants here, with the exception of a few rescissions via Doge. So the idea that the Republicans are being completely unreasonable here doesn't hold water. And the last thing I'll say, Jim, I don't know if this was off the top of your head or it's an homage to Alf, but excellent reference to Mrs. Ochmonek,
yes,
the neighbor on Alf. And at the time, we didn't even know she was Jerry Seinfeld's mom. So that's pretty cool.
Very good. I was just looking. So the other one I do is Miss Offmar, who was the teacher in the Peanuts cartoon. So. Yes. It's always you always want some vaguely ethnic, old-fashioned name for you're picturing the sweet, old school marm and all these disappointed kids standing outside the locked doors of the Smithsonian, pressing their noses against the glass to see the Wright brothers or something.
Yep, exactly right. But yeah, shutdown theater. Let's hope we don't get to that point, but sounds like the Democrats almost want it at this point. So, Jim, quite a day yet again. We'll probably have more on Dallas later in the week. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch. If you don't already, tell your friends about us as well. Would love to have them listening. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific Wednesday and join us again Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.